They entered the Sterling Tower glass conference room with the arrogance of the undefeated, convinced blood was their ticket to the elite. My parents and my perfect brother Caleb looked at me like I was still the 14-year-old girl they abandoned at St. Jude's on Christmas Eve over a lie. They believed my aunt left them a $500 million empire. They were wrong. She left a blueprint for their destruction, and I was the architect of their ruin. My name is Arya Langston. I sat at the head of the table, not as a grieving niece, but as a general surveying a battlefield she had already mined. The conference room on the 80th floor of the Sterling Architecture Tower was a masterpiece of intimidation. It was a glass box suspended in the sky, designed by my Aunt Vivian to make anyone sitting inside feel exposed, small, and terrifyingly finite. Outside, a February blizzard was burying New York City. The floor-to-ceiling windows were cold to the touch, and the wind howled against the reinforced glass with a sound like tearing metal. The city lights below were just blurred smudges of gold in a sea of white violence. Inside, the silence was absolute. The air conditioning was set to a crisp 65 degrees, a temperature calculated to keep minds sharp and bodies slightly uncomfortable. I checked my watch. It was a Patek Philippe, vintage, understated, and worth more than the house my parents currently lived in. I was 32 years old, and I had spent the last 18 years shedding every layer of skin that connected me to the people who were about to walk through those doors. I was wearing a black suit, bespoke, cut from Italian wool that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. It was armor. My hair was pulled back in a severe, architectural bun, and my face was a mask of absolute neutrality. My hands rested on the polished surface of the black marble table. They were steady. I looked at my reflection in the dark stone. I did not look like the girl who had cried herself to sleep on a cot at St. Jude's. I looked like Vivian. The heavy double doors opened. They walked in with the hesitant arrogance of tourists entering a cathedral they intended to rob. My father, Richard, came first. He was wearing a charcoal suit that was a size too tight across the shoulders, a relic of better years. His face was drawn into a practiced expression of mournful solemnity, but his eyes were darting around the room, assessing the square footage, the furniture, the view. He was calculating. He was always calculating, and he was always wrong. Behind him came my mother, Martha. She was draped in a black fur coat that I knew she had charged to a credit card she could not pay off. Her blonde hair was coiffed into a rigid helmet of curls, and she reeked of a floral perfume that was too sweet, too heavy, and entirely inappropriate for the sterile elegance of this room. She clutched a lace handkerchief, though her eyes were dry, and then there was Caleb. My brother walked in last. He was 34 years old, but he carried himself with the swagger of a college quarterback who had never realized the game ended a decade ago. He wore a navy blue suit that was too shiny, a flashy gold watch, and an expression of unearned confidence. He looked at the room not with awe, but with a predatory hunger. He looked at me, sitting at the head of the table, and his lip curled just slightly. It was a micro-expression of disdain. He did not see the CEO of a global empire. He saw the little sister he had framed. He saw an obstacle. "Arya," my mother breathed out, rushing forward. Her heels clicked sharply on the stone floor. "Oh, my poor baby." She opened her arms, descending on me with a performance of maternal affection that would have been impressive if I did not know her heart was a calculator. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders, pressing her cheek against mine. Her fur coat felt like a suffocating animal. I did not move. I did not hug her back. I did not pull away. I simply sat there, rigid as a steel beam, letting her hold onto a statue. The embrace became awkward. The silence in the room stretched. She realized I was not yielding, and she pulled back, her hands lingering on my shoulders for a second too long. She looked into my eyes, searching for a crack, for a tear, for any sign of the desperate child who used to beg for her attention. She found nothing. "You look tired, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with a saccharine concern that made my stomach turn. This has been so hard on all of us. But we are here now. The family is together. Sit down, I said. My voice was low, even, and devoid of inflection. Martha blinked, surprised by the command. She stepped back, smoothing her coat, and took the seat to my right. Richard sat beside her. Caleb pulled out the chair at the opposite end of the table, facing me directly. He unbuttoned his jacket and leaned back, spreading his arms wide as if he already owned the building. "Well," Caleb said, his voice booming unnecessarily loud in the acoustic perfection of the room. "It is good to see you. Arya, really, it has been, 5 years? You have done a decent job holding the fort down for Aunt Vivian. I have to say, the office is nice, a little cold, but impressive." 18 years, I corrected him, staring at the knot of his tie. It was crooked. "It has been 18 years since we lived under the same roof, Caleb, and 5 years since I last saw you at grandmother's funeral, where you tried to sell her jewelry before the casket was even closed." Caleb laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Always the drama queen. That was a misunderstanding. But look, we are not here to hash out ancient history. We are here to talk business. Dad and I were looking at the numbers for sterling architecture. I have some ideas, big ideas. My firm, Langston Construction, has developed some proprietary modular tech that could really synergize with Vivian's legacy. I am thinking a merger. We bring the grit. You bring the name. It is a win-win." I looked at him with genuine scientific curiosity. His firm, Langston Construction, was currently facing 3 lawsuits for code violations and was bleeding cash. He wasn't looking for a merger. He was looking for a lifeboat. "The reading is about to begin," I said. Ignoring his pitch entirely, the side door opened, and Marcus Thorne walked in. If the room was a weapon, Marcus was the trigger. He was 65 years old, a black man of imposing stature and terrifying intellect. He had been Vivian's personal attorney and confidant for 40 years. He knew where every body was buried because he had dug most of the holes. He carried a leather briefcase that looked as old as the practice of law itself. He did not look at my parents. He did not look at Caleb. He walked to the center of the room, placed the briefcase on the table, and stood next to me. "Good morning," Marcus said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and commanded instant silence. "I am Marcus Thorne, executor of the estate of Vivian Sterling. We are here to read her last will and testament. This meeting is being recorded." Caleb leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Cut the formalities. Marcus, we know the drill. We are the only living relatives. Just tell us what the bottom line is so we can get to work. I have a meeting with my investors at 2, and I want to walk in there with the Sterling portfolio in my pocket." Marcus looked at Caleb over the rim of his spectacles. The look lasted for 5 seconds. It was enough to make Richard shift uncomfortably in his seat. "Mr. Langston," Marcus said, his tone icy, "you are here as a beneficiary candidate, not a board member. You will remain silent until the reading is concluded, or you will be removed by security. Do I make myself clear?" Caleb's face flushed a blotchy red. He opened his mouth to argue, then saw the 2 security guards standing like shadows by the main doors. He snapped his mouth shut and slumped back in his chair. Crossing his arms like a petulant child, Marcus opened the briefcase. He took out a thick document bound in blue paper. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. "I, Vivian Sterling, being of sound mind and body, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The preamble was standard legal boilerplate, but the tension in the room grew with every paragraph. My parents were leaning forward, their eyes locked on the document as if they could extract the money through sheer force of will. "Article 4, Marcus read, his voice filling the room. "Inventory of assets. The estate of Vivian Sterling includes the following." He paused, letting the silence build. "The primary residence, a penthouse at 432 Park Avenue, valued at $85 million. My mother gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. 85 million? She was mentally redecorating it already. The Sterling collection of modern art, including works by Basquiat, Rothko, and Hockney, appraised at $120 million. Richard's eyes widened. He licked his lips. The commercial land holdings in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and London, valued at $215 million. Caleb was not slumping anymore. He was sitting bolt upright, vibrating with adrenaline. He was doing the math. And finally, Marcus said, the controlling interest in Sterling Architecture and its subsidiaries, 75% of all voting shares. Current market valuation exceeds $500 million. The number hung in the air. $500 million, $500 million. It was a number that could rewrite history. It was a number that could erase debts, buy power, and silence critics. It was the number my family had been waiting for their entire lives. They looked at each other, a silent communication of ecstatic greed passing between them. They had won. They had survived the lean years, the mediocrity, the failures. They were rich. They were Sterling rich. Caleb looked at me. The disdain was gone, replaced by a smug, victorious grin. Well, he said, I think we can all agree that Aunt Vivian did well for herself. Aria, we are going to need to set up a transition team immediately. I want to see the books by Monday, and we need to discuss your role. I am sure we can find a place for you in the new structure, maybe in operations or HR. You have done a good job keeping the seat warm, but this is the big leagues now. He thought I was an employee. He thought I was just the caretaker of his inheritance. I did not answer. I just watched Marcus. Marcus did not close the blue folder. Instead, he reached back into his briefcase. The sound of the leather creaking was the only noise in the room. He pulled out a second envelope. It was not blue. It was a deep, blood red. It was sealed with red wax, stamped with the Sterling crest, a stylized drafting compass. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The air grew heavy, charged with static. The smile on Caleb's face faltered. My mother lowered her handkerchief. Richard went still. What is that? Richard asked, his voice tight. This, Marcus said, placing the red envelope in the center of the black marble table, is the conditional addendum. I don't understand, Martha said, her voice trembling slightly. The will. You just read the assets. I read the inventory, Marcus corrected her. I did not read the distribution. Vivian Sterling left specific instructions. This envelope was to be produced only if, and when, all 4 members of the Langston family were physically present in this room. If any of you had failed to appear, if any of you had declined the invitation. This envelope would have been incinerated, and the estate would have been distributed according to the standard protocol. Standard protocol? Caleb asked. What does that mean? It means, I said, speaking for the first time since the reading began. My voice cut through the confusion like a scalpel. That you are all very lucky you decided to show up. They turned to look at me. For the first time, they really looked at me. They saw the way I was sitting, the absolute lack of surprise on my face. They saw the predator in the eyes of the girl they had thrown away. I looked at the red envelope. I knew every word written inside. I had spent nights with Vivian drafting it, refining the language, sharpening the clauses until they were razor blades hidden in legal jargon. It was not just a will, it was a trap, and they had just walked into the center of the cage. A smile touched my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the cold, terrifying smile of an architect who watches a demolition charge count down to 0. Open it, Marcus, I said softly. Let us see what family is really worth. The red wax seal on the envelope seemed to dissolve under my gaze, bleeding outward until it consumed the sterile conference room. The pristine white snow outside the window darkened, transforming into the slushy gray muck of a queen's winter. The silence of the office shattered, replaced by the chaotic static of a police radio and the rhythmic, suffocating thud of my own heart against my ribs. I was no longer 32. I was 14 years old. It was Christmas Eve, 18 years ago. Our house in the suburbs was small, cramped, and smelled perpetually of my mother's potpourri and my father's anxiety. We were not poor, but we were teetering on the edge of it. My parents, Richard and Martha, lived their lives on a razor wire of credit card debt and keeping up appearances. They had mortgaged their sanity to maintain the illusion of a middle-class success story, and the centerpiece of that illusion was Caleb. Caleb was 16 years old, handsome, charming, and supposedly a genius. He was the golden ticket. My parents spoke of his future like it was a guaranteed investment that would pay off their mortgage and fund their retirement. He was going to get a scholarship to an Ivy League school. He was going to be a senator, a CEO, a savior, but I knew the truth. I slept in the room next to his. Through the thin drywall, I heard the frantic typing at 3 a.m. I heard the hushed, angry phone calls where he begged for more time. Caleb was not studying advanced calculus. He was gambling. He was addicted to online poker, chasing high-stakes adrenaline with money he did not have. He had stolen my babysitting money. He had pawned my mother's silver candlesticks, and he had always talked his way out of it. But he could not talk his way out of $15,000 in debt to a loan shark who threatened to break his legs. The crash came on a Tuesday. My father came home from work early, his face the color of old ash. He was the manager of a mid-tier jewelry store in the mall, a job he held on to with a desperate, sweaty grip. He walked into the kitchen and collapsed onto a chair. $50,000 in inventory was missing, a tray of diamond rings. The safe had been opened with the code. There was no forced entry. The police were on their way to our house to question him because he was the only one with the code who had been on shift. I remember watching Caleb. He was standing by the refrigerator, drinking milk directly from the carton. He froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and terrified. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the drowning panic in his eyes. I thought he was going to confess. I thought, for one naive moment, that he would finally be a man. Instead, he went upstairs. 10 minutes later, the police arrived, 2 officers, looking bored and annoyed that they had to work on Christmas Eve. They stood in our living room, snow melting from their boots onto the beige carpet my mother was so proud of. They asked my father questions. They asked to search the house, just to rule out any possibilities. My father, desperate to prove his innocence, agreed immediately. They searched my parents' room. Nothing. They searched the garage. Nothing. They went to Caleb's room. Caleb was sitting on his bed, surrounded by textbooks. He looked up. The picture of the innocent, studious son interrupted in the middle of his academic pursuit. He let them search his drawers, his closet, his backpack. They found nothing. Of course they found nothing. He was too smart for that. Then they came to my room. I was sitting on the floor wrapping a present for my mother. It was a scarf I had bought with months of saved allowance. Officer Miller, a man with a thick mustache and eyes that had seen too much disappointment, pointed to my school backpack sitting in the corner. "Empty it out." "Sweetheart," he said. I did not hesitate. I had nothing to hide. I grabbed the bottom of the bag and shook it upside down. My history textbook fell out with a heavy thud. Then my pencil case. Then a bag of gym clothes. And then, tumbling out from the hidden pocket inside the lining, came a small velvet pouch. It hit the floor with a soft sound that seemed to echo like a gunshot. The room went silent. Officer Miller bent down and picked it up. He opened the drawstring and tipped the contents into his palm, a diamond solitaire ring, glittering under the harsh ceiling light. "Richard," the officer said, holding it up, "is this part of the inventory?" My father made a choking sound. He stared at the ring, then at me, his face twisted in confusion and horror. "Arya, what? How did you—" "I didn't," I screamed. The denial tore out of my throat, raw and terrified. I have never seen that before, I swear. I looked at Caleb. He was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame. He was not looking at me. He was looking at our parents. And then, he delivered the performance of his life. I didn't want to say anything," Caleb stammered. his voice trembling with fake reluctance. He stepped into the room, wringing his hands. "Mom, Dad, I think Arya has a problem." "What are you talking about?" my mother whispered, clutching her pearls. "She has been bringing things home," Caleb said, lowering his eyes shamefully. "Small things at first, lipsticks from the drugstore, money from your purse. I tried to talk to her. I told her to stop. She said she was jealous. She said she was tired of everyone talking about my scholarship. She said she wanted something shiny for herself. It was a lie so audacious, so perfectly crafted to play on my parents' insecurities, that it took my breath away. He was using their own narrative against them. He knew they were worried about money. He knew they were focused on him. He painted me as the jealous, acting out sibling, the dark stain on their perfect picture. "That is a lie," I shouted. Scrambling to my feet, I grabbed my mother's arm. "Mom, he is lying. He came home early today. I heard him in my room. He put it there, Caleb. Tell them." My mother looked at me. Then she looked at the police officer holding the evidence of a felony. Then she looked at Caleb, her golden boy, her hope, her future. I saw the calculation happen in real time behind her eyes. It was a cold, brutal equation. If Caleb was the thief, his scholarship was gone, his future was gone, their retirement plan was gone, the family reputation would be destroyed. They would be the parents of a criminal. But if I was the thief, I was just a troubled 14-year-old girl. I was a minor. I could be treated. I could be sent away. The good child would remain untainted. The dream would survive. My mother pulled her arm away from my grip. It was a small movement, but it severed the bond between us forever. "She has been acting out lately," my mother said to the officer. Her voice was steady. She did not look at me. We have been worried about her mental state." "Mom," I whispered. The word felt like broken glass in my mouth. "I am sorry, officer," my father added, his voice hollow. He stared at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. "We will do whatever is necessary. We cannot have this criminality in our house." They chose. In that split second, they weighed their daughter against their reputation, and they found me wanting. The police did not arrest me. My father, in a desperate bid to save face, made a deal with the store owner. The merchandise was returned. No charges would be pressed if the problem was removed. The problem was me. 2 hours later, my father's sedan was idling in the driveway. My mother had packed a suitcase for me. She did not pack my favorite sweater. She did not pack the scarf I had bought for her. She packed the bare minimum, as if erasing my presence from the house required erasing my possessions too. "Get in the car," my father said. "Where are we going?" I asked, tears streaming down my face, freezing on my cheeks in the winter wind. "It is Christmas Eve. Please, Dad, I didn't do it." He did not answer. Caleb watched from the living room window. He did not wave. He just watched, his face blank, safe behind the glass, safe in the lie that had just cost me my life. We drove for 40 minutes in absolute silence. The radio was off. The heater was blasting. But I was shivering so hard my teeth chattered. We pulled up to a grim brick building in a part of the city I had never visited. A faded sign above the heavy oak doors read, "St. Jude's Home for Children." It was an orphanage, a dumping ground for the unwanted, the broken, and the inconvenient. My mother got out of the car. She walked me to the front steps. She rang the bell. A woman in a gray habit opened the door. She looked at me with eyes that held no pity, only administrative fatigue. "This is the girl?" the woman asked. "Yes," my mother said. She handed over a thick envelope of paperwork. They had signed the surrender forms. They were relinquishing custody. They were citing uncontrollable behavioral issues and threat to family safety. "Please," I sobbed, grabbing my mother's coat, the cheap wool one she wore before the fur. "Mom, please don't leave me here. I am scared. I will be good. I will do anything. Just take me home." My mother looked down at me. For a second, her face crumbled. I saw the guilt. I saw the horror of what she was doing. But then she thought of the neighbors. She thought of the bank account. She thought of Caleb. She peeled my fingers off her sleeve, one by one. "It is for your own good, Arya," she said. "You need to learn to be honest. You need to learn consequences." She turned around. She walked back to the car. She got in. My father put the car in gear. I stood on the snowy steps, screaming for them to stop, screaming that I was innocent, screaming until my throat bled. They did not look back. The red taillights of the sedan receded into the darkness, shrinking until they were swallowed by the snow. The nun grabbed my shoulder. Her grip was like iron. "That is enough noise," she said sharply. "Inside, now." She dragged me into the hallway. The smell hit me instantly, a mixture of industrial bleach, boiled cabbage, and damp wool. It was the smell of institutional misery. That first night was a blur of humiliation. I was stripped, searched for contraband, and given a uniform that was 2 sizes too big. I was assigned a bed in a dormitory with 20 other girls. The mattress was thin, sagging in the middle, and the springs shrieked every time I moved. The room was freezing. The radiator hissed and clanged, but produced no heat. I lay there in the dark, staring at the cracked plaster of the ceiling. I could hear the other girls breathing. Some were snoring. One was crying softly into her pillow. I did not cry. I had cried all my tears on the steps. Now, there was only a vast, empty hollow inside my chest where my heart used to be. I realized something that night, lying in the cold dark of St. Jude's. I realized that the truth did not matter. Innocence did not matter. In the real world, the only thing that mattered was leverage. Caleb had leverage. He was their hope. I had none. I was expendable. My parents had not abandoned me because they believed I was a thief. They abandoned me because it was the easiest solution to their problem. I rolled over on the hard mattress. The girl in the next bunk, a tough-looking teenager with a scar on her chin, hissed at me. "Shut up, new girl," she whispered, "and keep your hands to yourself. I heard you are a magpie. You touch my stuff. I break your fingers." The label had already arrived. Magpie. Thief. I did not answer her. I closed my eyes. I made a vow to the darkness. I would survive this. I would not let this place break me. I would not become the tragedy they expected me to be. I would learn. I would watch. I would become so strong, so undeniable, that no one would ever be able to dispose of me again. I spent the next 6 months in hell. I was bullied relentlessly. They stole my food. They put spiders in my shoes. They tripped me in the hallways. I never fought back physically. I was too small, too weak. Instead, I became a ghost. I learned to walk without making a sound. I learned to read lips across the cafeteria. I learned to memorize the routines of the staff, the weaknesses of the bullies, the flow of power in the building. I became invisible, and in my invisibility, I began to sharpen my mind like a shiv. I did not know it then, sitting in the corner of the library with a torn encyclopedia. But I was preparing. I was preparing for the day the red envelope would open. I was preparing for the long, cold game of revenge, and it all started there. On a lumpy mattress on Christmas Eve, while my family sat in their warm house, eating turkey and celebrating the lie that had erased me. 6 months of silence had turned me into something hard and hollow, like a geode waiting to be cracked open. It was June, and the heat in the street. Jude dormitory was suffocating. The air smelled of stale sweat and floor wax. I was sitting on my bed, reading a discarded textbook on Euclidean geometry that I had salvaged from the trash. When the door opened, Sister Margaret, the director who usually looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and pity, looked terrified. She smoothed her habit and gestured for me to stand up. "You have a visitor, Arya," she said. Her voice was tight. "Do not embarrass us." I did not have visitors. My parents had made it clear that I was a closed chapter. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles in my oversized gray uniform, and followed her down the hallway. The visitor's room was usually a place of heartbreak, where social workers delivered bad news to crying children, but today, the room felt different. The air was charged, cooler, as if the person inside had brought their own atmosphere. Standing by the window, looking out at the cracked pavement of the playground, was a woman. She turned as I entered. She was tall, terrifyingly thin, and dressed in a pearl gray suit that cost more than the entire orphanage building. Her hair was silver, cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed a face of severe, angular beauty. She looked like an older, harder version of my father, stripped of all his weakness and apology. It was my aunt, Vivian Sterling, the woman my father called the Ice Queen, the sister he had not spoken to in 20 years because she had chosen her career over his wedding. She did not smile. She did not offer a hug. She looked at me with eyes the color of polished steel, scanning me from my scuffed shoes to my messy hair. It was not a look of affection, it was an inspection. She was checking for structural integrity. "Leave us," Vivian said to Sister Margaret. It was not a request. The nun scurried out, closing the door. Vivian walked over to the rusted metal table in the center of the room. She placed a leather briefcase on it and clicked the latches open. She took out 2 items, a Rubik's Cube that had been scrambled into a chaos of colors, and a large, rolled-up sheet of blue paper. "Sit," she commanded. I sat. "I am not here to offer you sympathy," she said. Her voice was low, crisp, and precise. "Sympathy is a waste of time. I am here because I heard what happened. My brother is a fool, and your mother is a coward. But that is irrelevant. What is relevant is whether you are useful." She pushed the Rubik's Cube toward me. "Solve it." I looked at the cube. I looked at her. "Why?" "Do not ask questions you are not in a position to have answered. Solve it." My hands moved automatically. I had found a cube in the playroom months ago. It was one of the few things that quieted the noise in my head. I twisted the plastic, the clicks echoing in the quiet room. Algorithms flashed in my mind. Top layer, middle layer, corners. I set it down on the table. Solved. In 45 seconds. Vivian did not blink. She pushed the blue paper toward me. She unrolled it. It was a complex architectural schematic. A cross-section of a high-rise support system, white lines on blue paper, a web of tension and compression. "This is a design for a cantilevered observation deck," she said. "There is a fatal flaw in the load distribution. Find it." I stared at the drawing. I had never studied architecture. I was 14 years old. But I understood patterns. I understood logic. I traced the lines with my finger. I looked at the steel beams, the counterweights, the fulcrum point. The math played out in my head like a song, the weight of the glass, the wind shear, the anchor point. My finger stopped at a junction on the 3rd support strut. "Here," I said, tapping the paper. "The moment arm is too long for this grade of steel. If the wind hits 40 miles per hour from the north, the torque will shear the bolts. The deck will collapse." I looked up. It had taken me less than 2 minutes. Vivian stared at the spot I had pointed to. For the first time. A flicker of something like satisfaction crossed her face. It was not warmth. It was the look a blacksmith gives a piece of iron that strikes true. "Pack your things," she said. "We are leaving." "Where are we going?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Are you adopting me?" Vivian laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Adoption implies I want a child. I do not. I want an heir. I want a mind I can hone. If you come with me, you are not going to be Richard's daughter anymore. You are not going to be the girl who cries over a stolen ring. You will be my shadow. You will be my instrument. And eventually, if you survive the process, you will be my successor." She leaned in close. I could smell her perfume, something cold and metallic, like rain on pavement. "But be warned, Arya, I am not a mother. I am a teacher, and I am cruel. I will break you down and rebuild you, and I will not stop until you are perfect. Do you accept? I thought of the cold dormitory. I thought of my mother's back as she walked away in the snow. I thought of Caleb's smug face. Yes, I said. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in the back of a black limousine, watching the orphanage disappear in the rearview mirror. I left my uniform. I left the few pitiful belongings I had acquired. I took only the anger. Vivian lived in a world that did not obey the laws of the world I knew. Her estate in the Hamptons was not a house. It was a manifesto. It was a structure of glass, concrete, and steel perched on the edge of a cliff, daring the Atlantic Ocean to erode it. It was minimalist to the point of hostility. There were no soft chairs. There were no family photos. There was only light, space, and silence. "This is the first rule," Vivian said as we stood in the vast, echoing foyer. "Chaos is the enemy. Clutter is the enemy. Your mind must be like this room, open, clear, dangerous." My education began the next morning at 6 o'clock sharp. There was no public school. Vivian had hired a phalanx of private tutors who treated me not as a student, but as an employee who was failing to meet a quota. Mr. Petrov, a retired Russian physicist, taught me advanced mathematics until my eyes watered. He did not let me use a calculator. "The machine makes you lazy," he would shout, slamming a ruler on the table. "The numbers must live in your blood." Ms. Sterling, as I was instructed to call her, handled the rest. She taught me structural engineering. She taught me the history of architecture. But more importantly, she taught me the physics of power. Negotiation is not about talking. She told me over a dinner of grilled salmon and water. It is about leverage. Every person has a structural weakness, a crack in the foundation. Your job is to find it, and then apply pressure until they break. The training was brutal. It was relentless. I had no friends. I had no weekends. I had only the work. But the hardest lessons happened at 3 o'clock in the morning. Vivian would wake me up. She would stand over my bed, fully dressed in her work boots and hard hat, and shine a flashlight in my face. "Get up," she would say. "The concrete is pouring." We would drive into the city, to the skeletons of skyscrapers rising out of the mud in Manhattan. We would stand on the edge of open pits, 50 feet deep, while rain lashed against our faces. The noise of the jackhammers and the shouting of the foreman was deafening. "Look at that beam," Vivian would shout over the roar of a generator, pointing to a massive I-beam being hoisted by a crane. "Estimate the load." I would squint against the rain, shivering in my coat. 10 tons. "Wrong." She would grab my shoulder, her grip painful. "Look at the deflection. Look at the cable tension. It is 12 tons. If you miscalculate by 2 tons in the field, people die, do it again." She made me calculate the volume of concrete in a foundation while standing in ankle-deep mud. She made me read the stress fractures in a retaining wall by the light of a headlamp. She taught me to see the world not as a collection of objects, but as a collection of forces: tension, compression, shear, torque. One night, 6 months into my training, I broke. It was November. We were standing on the 42nd floor of an unfinished tower. The wind was freezing. I was exhausted. I had failed a calculus exam earlier that day, and Vivian had made me rewrite the entire textbook by hand. I started to cry. The tears were hot and angry, spilling down my cheeks. I sank to my knees on the rough concrete floor. "I want to go home," I sobbed. It was a lie. I had no home. But I wanted the pain to stop. "I am just a kid. Why are you doing this to me?" Vivian did not comfort me. She did not offer me a handkerchief. She walked over to the edge of the building, where the floor dropped off into a 400-foot abyss. "Come here," she said. I wiped my face and walked to the edge, my legs shaking. "Look down," she ordered. I looked. The city was a grid of lights below us. The cars were tiny specks. "You see that city?" Vivian asked. "It does not care about your tears. Gravity does not care about your feelings. If you fall, you hit the ground. The laws of physics are absolute. She turned to me, her face illuminated by the red warning light of a crane. Nourish your anger, Arya, but never, ever let it leak out through your eyes. Crying is a hydraulic failure. It is energy leaving the system. You are building a fortress, and a fortress with a leak will eventually collapse. Do you understand? I looked at her. I saw the coldness in her eyes, but I also saw the strength. She was invincible because she had removed everything that could hurt her. I stopped crying. I took a deep breath of the freezing air. I felt the sob die in my throat, turning into a hard, cold knot in my chest. I understand, I said. Good, Vivian said. Now, calculate the wind load on this floor plate. The next day, I cut my hair. I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom. My hair was long, wavy, the kind of hair my mother used to brush while telling me how pretty I was. I took the kitchen shears and I hacked it off. I cut it short, sharp, an angled bob, just like Vivian's. I looked at the girl in the mirror. The soft, scared child from the orphanage was gone. Her eyes were different. They were darker. They were observing. I went to my closet and took out the colorful sweaters and jeans I had worn as a child. I put them in a trash bag. I put on a white button-down shirt and black trousers that Vivian had bought for me. They were crisp, tailored, and severe. I walked downstairs to the study where Vivian was reviewing blueprints. I stood in the doorway. My name is not Arya Marie Langston anymore, I said. Vivian looked up. She saw the hair. She saw the clothes. She saw the lack of fear. What is it, then? She asked. Arya Vivian Langston, I said. Vivian stared at me for a long moment. Then, she picked up her pen and went back to work. Get to work, Arya, she said. We have a skyscraper to build. I sat down at the drafting table across from her. I picked up my pencil. I realized then that I was not just learning how to build buildings. I was learning how to build myself. I was digging the foundation deep, pouring the concrete of my resentment, and reinforcing it with the steel of my ambition. My parents and Caleb thought they had buried me. They were wrong. They had just planted me. And now, under the harsh light of Vivian's tutelage, I was beginning to grow. I was becoming something they would not recognize, something they could not break, and eventually, something that would cast a shadow over their entire world. The architect was born. I entered the Sterling Architecture headquarters not through the grand, marble-lined lobby reserved for executives, but through the service entrance in the basement. I was 22, fresh out of an accelerated master's program at MIT that I had completed in 3 years under a pseudonym. Vivian had been explicit nepotism breeds weakness. If I wanted the throne, I had to build the stairs myself. I started as a junior archivist. My job was to organize thousands of rolls of blueprints in a sub-basement that smelled of ozone and dust. I wore gray slacks and white shirts, indistinguishable from the cleaning staff. No one knew I was Vivian Sterling's niece. To them, I was just Arya, the quiet girl who reorganized the filing system with terrifying efficiency. For 6 months, I was invisible. I listened. I learned the rhythm of the company who was sleeping with whom, who was padding their expense reports, and who was actually doing the work. Then came the Omega project. It was a massive suspension bridge project in Dubai, a billion-dollar contract that was the crown jewel of the firm's portfolio. The lead engineer was a man named Marcus Vane, a pompous industry veteran who spent more time golfing with clients than checking load calculations. One late Tuesday night, while filing schematics for the bridge's anchor pylons, I saw it. It was a subtle error in the harmonic resonance dampeners. Vane had used a standard coefficient for wind shear, ignoring the specific thermal updrafts of the desert location. If the wind hit 45 miles per hour at a specific angle, the bridge would not just sway, it would disintegrate. I stared at the blueprint. I could have gone to Vane. He would have patted me on the head and fired me for insubordination. Instead, I took the blueprint. I stayed up all night, redrawing the dampener system. I recalculated the torque, adjusted the tension cables, and added a secondary counterweight system. I signed the bottom corner simply AL. The next morning, I slipped the revised schematic onto the top of the stack on Vivian's desk before she arrived. At 10 o'clock, the entire office heard the explosion. Vivian stormed out of her office, slamming the door so hard the glass walls rattled. She marched into the main engineering floor, holding my drawing. "Who did this?" she demanded. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a guillotine blade. The room went silent. Vane stepped forward, looking confused. "Vivian, I assure you, the team is working on—" "Shut up, Marcus," she snapped. "I am looking for the person who realized that your design would kill 500 people in a sandstorm. Who is A.L.?" I stood up from my desk in the corner. "I am," Vane laughed, "the archivist Vivian. This is ridiculous. She files papers. She doesn't know. She knows that you missed a harmonic variance of 0.4. Vivian interrupted, her eyes cold. "She fixed your mess. Marcus, pack your things. You are done." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Vane turned red, then purple. He looked at me with pure hatred, but he packed his box. That afternoon, I was moved to an office on the 45th floor. My title was Junior Project Lead. The whispers started immediately. They said I slept my way up. They said I was a spy. They hated me. I loved it. Their hatred was validation. But the real test came 2 years later. I was 24. The board of directors was filled with old men who viewed Vivian as a brilliant anomaly and me as a temporary nuisance. The ringleader was Arthur Pendergast, a 70-year-old dinosaur who believed women belonged in the kitchen or on a magazine cover. We were pitching a massive eco-city project to a consortium of Japanese investors. Pendergast had insisted on leading the presentation. He had prepared a flashy, shallow pitch, focused on aesthetics, completely ignoring the complex seismic requirements the Japanese clients prioritized. We sat in the boardroom, the Japanese delegation, led by the formidable Mr. Tanaka, looked unimpressed. Pendergast was rambling about organic flow and visual harmony. Tanaka interrupted him, speaking in rapid technical Japanese to his aide. He said, "This man is a fool. He treats us like tourists. He has no data on the liquefaction soil mitigation. We should leave." Pendergast smiled obliviously. "I am sorry. I don't speak Japanese. But I assume you are admiring the render." I stood up. "Tanaka-san," I said, bowing slightly. I switched to flawless, technical Japanese. "With all due respect, Mr. Pendergast is focusing on the skin of the project. Allow me to show you the bones." The room froze. Pendergast looked at me like I had grown a second head. I walked to the screen. I pulled up the hidden files I had prepared, the seismic load charts, the soil density analysis, the advanced dampening systems I had designed specifically for the Tokyo fault lines. I spoke for 20 minutes, detailing the engineering in their own language, respecting their expertise, answering their unspoken fears. When I finished, Mr. Tanaka stood up. He bowed to me, a deep, respectful bow. "Sterling Architecture has our contract," he said in English, "but only if Ms. Langston leads the project." Pendergast was sidelined. I was promoted to senior director. I had not just won a contract. I had decapitated a rival without spilling a drop of blood. But while I was climbing the glass tower, my past was festering in the shadows. One afternoon, I was reviewing vendor bids for a new residential complex in Brooklyn. I was scanning the list of subcontractors when a name jumped out at me like a physical blow. Langston Construction Drywall. My heart stopped for a second, then restarted with a cold, hard rhythm. I pulled the file. It was Caleb. His company was small, shabby, and desperate. He was bidding on the drywall contract for one of my buildings. I looked at his proposal. It was typical Caleb, undercutting the competition by 20%. I dug deeper. I accessed the industry databases Vivian had given me access to. I looked at his previous jobs. There were complaints of mold, cracking plaster, and worst of all, the use of non-compliant, flammable insulation to save money. He was trying to cut corners in my building. He was trying to bring his rot into my empire. I picked up my pen. I did not feel anger. I felt a clinical detachment, like a surgeon excising a tumor. I wrote a rejection letter. It was not personal. It was professional devastation. Dear Mr. Langston, your bid for the Brooklyn Heights project has been rejected. Furthermore, a review of your material sourcing indicates multiple violations of ASTM safety standards. Specifically, the use of Grade C insulation in residential zoning is a violation of federal code. Effective immediately. Langston Construction is placed on the Sterling exclusionary list. You are barred from bidding on any future contracts with this firm or its subsidiaries. Regards, A.L. I signed it, sealed it, and dropped it in the outgoing mail. I imagined Caleb opening it. I imagined him raging in his cheap office, blaming the world, blaming the system, never knowing that the hand that slapped him down belonged to the sister he had framed. I kept tabs on them. It was my secret vice. I hired a private investigator to send me quarterly reports on my family, while I was buying my first apartment in Manhattan, a sleek loft in Tribeca. My parents were refinancing their house for the third time. My father had been let go from the jewelry store after another inventory mismatch. He was now working at a car dealership, looking old and defeated. My mother was still trying to keep up appearances, hosting potlucks she could not afford, wearing clothes she bought and returned the next day. They were drowning in debt, most of it incurred to bail Caleb out of his various failed ventures. Caleb was the worst of them. He drove a leased BMW he could not make payments on. He dated women he lied to about his wealth. He was a hollow man, a facade with nothing behind it but termites and rot. They were miserable, and they deserved to be. By the time I was 28, I was the de facto number 2 at Sterling Architecture. My title was Executive Vice President, but everyone knew I was the shadow CEO. Vivian's health had begun to decline, a slight tremor in her hand, a fatigue she could not hide, and she leaned on me more and more. One evening, late in December, Vivian called me into her office. The city outside was a grid of lights, beautiful and indifferent. She opened the wall safe behind her desk. It was a heavy titanium vault that held the company's deepest secrets. She took out a key, a physical, heavy iron key that looked like it belonged to a medieval dungeon. "This," she said, placing it in my hand, "is the key to the archive. Not the blueprints. Aria, the real archive." "What is in there?" I asked, feeling the cold metal against my palm. "Leverage," Vivian said. "Dirt, evidence, for 40 years. I have collected information on every politician, every rival CEO, every corrupt inspector who tried to stand in my way. This company runs on steel and glass, but it is protected by silence and fear." She looked at me, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion lining her face. "You are ready," she said. "You have the mind, you have the skill, but now you need the teeth. Take the key. The empire is almost yours." I closed my fingers around the key. I felt the weight of it. It was not just a key to a safe, it was the key to my final transformation. I was no longer just the architect, I was the gatekeeper. And as I looked out at the city, I knew that somewhere out there in the dark suburbs, my family was sitting in their crumbling house, waiting for a savior who was never coming. They did not know that the only thing heading their way was a storm named Aria. The diagnosis arrived on a Tuesday in October. It came in a cream-colored envelope from a neurologist on the Upper East Side. Delivered directly to Vivian's desk. There was no drama, no tears. Vivian read the report, folded it neatly, and placed it in the shredder. "Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis," she said, her voice steady, though her right hand trembled slightly as she poured a glass of water. "ALS. The neurons are dying. The wiring is failing. The structure is compromised." I stood by the window, feeling the blood drain from my face. ALS was a death sentence. It was a slow, cruel dismantling of the body while the mind remained trapped inside, witnessing the collapse. "We will find the best doctors," I said, already reaching for my phone. "There are experimental treatments in Zurich. There are trials in—" "Stop," Vivian commanded. She turned her chair to face me. I am not a building. Arya, I cannot be retrofitted. The prognosis is 2 years for most. For me. Given the progression, maybe one, I will not spend my final year being poked by needles and pitied by nurses. I will not die in a hospital bed. She looked at the city skyline, her eyes hard and clear. I have 6 months of functional capacity left, she said. We have work to do. The succession must be absolute. The foundation must be poured before the house falls. The next 6 months were a masterclass in efficiency and grief. We did not talk about death. We talked about logistics. Vivian transferred her voting shares to a blind trust under my control. She walked me through the deepest intricacies of the company's tax shelters, the offshore holdings, and the political alliances she had forged over 40 years. But the most important work happened in the library of her penthouse. Late at night, under the glow of a green banker's lamp, it was Operation Bunker. The vultures will come, Vivian said one night in December. Her voice was slurring slightly, the muscles in her jaw beginning to weaken. My brother, your parents, Caleb, they have been waiting for this moment for decades. They smell the money. They have no claim, I said, stacking files on the desk. You cut them out years ago. Legally, yes, Vivian said. But greed is litigious. They will contest the will. They will claim I was senile. They will claim you manipulated me. They will drag your name through the mud to get a settlement. She opened a locked drawer in her mahogany desk. She pulled out a black external hard drive. It was small, sleek, and heavy. This, she said, sliding it across the leather surface, is the pesticide. I plugged it into my laptop. Folders appeared on the screen, arranged chronologically. Caleb Langston, Tax Evasion, 2018. Caleb Langston, Material Fraud, 2020. Caleb Langston, Bribery of City Official, 2023. I opened the files. It was all there. Vivian had been watching. She had hired private investigators to track every shady deal, every corner cut, every illegal transaction my brother had made in his desperate attempt to play businessman. There were bank records showing him laundering money through shell companies. There were emails proving he knowingly used asbestos-contaminated drywall in low-income housing. He is a criminal, I whispered. This is enough to put him in prison for 20 years. Yes, Vivian said, but prison is too easy. If we send him to jail now, he becomes a victim. He becomes a martyr. No, we let him come to the table. We let him think he has won. She looked at me, her eyes burning with a fierce, final intensity. We are going to write a trap into the will, she said. We are going to show them the carcass. We are going to let them feast. And when they are fat and happy and think they are safe, we detonate the mine. We spent weeks drafting the documents. The will, the conditional addendum, the poison pill. Every clause was a brick in the wall we were building around them. Every sentence was a wire trip. One night, a week before the end. Vivian grabbed my wrist. Her grip was weak, her fingers cold, but her gaze was terrifying. Promise me, she rasped. Promise me, Arya. No emotion, no anger, no screaming matches. You do not fight them with passion. You fight them with paper. You fight them with the truth. Passion rusts. The truth is stainless steel. I promise, I said. I will be the architect. Good, she whispered. Build it strong. Vivian died on a Tuesday morning in March. She was in her office at the penthouse. She had refused to stay in bed. She was sitting in her wheelchair, facing the window, looking out at the Empire State Building. I was in the kitchen making tea. When I came back in, she was gone. Her head was tipped forward slightly. Her hands were resting on her lap, holding a blueprint. She looked peaceful. She looked like she was just thinking, solving one last problem in her head. I did not scream. I did not cry. The promise held. I walked over to her. I touched her hand. It was already cooling. I closed her eyes. I took the blueprint from her lap. It was the design for the Sterling Foundation, a massive charitable trust dedicated to orphan care and education. It was her final legacy and my final mission. I walked to the door, I locked it, I called Marcus Thorne. "It is time," I said. "Execute Protocol Omega." The obituary ran in the New York Times the next morning. It was brief, dignified, and listed no surviving family other than her devoted niece and business partner, Aria Langston. The silence lasted exactly 3 hours. My phone, which I had kept on a private line for years, began to ring. It was a number I had not seen since I was 14, but one I had memorized in my nightmares. Home. I did not answer. I let it ring. Then came the emails to the general inquiry inbox of the firm. Then came the calls to Marcus. "Mr. Thorne," my father's voice said on the voicemail Marcus played for me later. He sounded breathless, fake, and eager. "This is Richard Langston, Vivian's brother. We just heard the terrible news. We are devastated, absolutely devastated. We need to discuss the arrangements and the estate. We are the next of kin. Please call us back immediately." Next of kin. They did not ask how she died. They did not ask about the funeral. They asked about the estate. Marcus looked at me across his desk. "They are circling," he said. "Let them land," I said, staring at the black hard drive in my hand. "Set the date for the reading. Make sure they are all there. Tell them it is mandatory. And if they ask about you," Marcus asked, "tell them nothing," I said. "Let them think I am just the secretary. Let them think I am the scared little girl they left in the snow." I stood up and walked to the window of Marcus's office. The city was moving below me, indifferent and alive. My family was coming for the money. They thought they were walking into a bank vault to make a withdrawal. They did not know they were walking into a demolition site, and I was holding the detonator. The sound of the red wax seal breaking was sharp and violent, like a dry bone snapping in the quiet room. Marcus Thorne did not rush. He unfolded the heavy cream-colored paper inside with the deliberate slowness of an executioner sharpening his axe. My family sat frozen. The greed that had been radiating off them moments ago had curdled into a thick, suffocating anxiety. They stared at the document in Marcus's hands as if it were a live grenade. "Proceed," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus cleared his throat. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. "I, Vivian Sterling, being of sound mind and judgment, hereby enact the distribution of my estate as follows. To my niece, Aria Vivian Langston. I leave the entirety of my assets, including the real estate portfolio, the art collection, the liquid capital, and the 100% controlling interest in Sterling architecture." Caleb let out a breath he had been holding. It sounded like a laugh. Okay, that is fine. Aria gets the title. We expected that. She is the face of the company. Now, get to the family trusts. Get to the cash distribution." Marcus looked up. His eyes were dark and unreadable. "I am not finished. Mr. Langston." He looked back at the paper. "However," Marcus read, emphasizing the word, "I recognize that I have 3 other living relatives. My brother, Richard, his wife, Martha, and their son, Caleb. While we have been estranged for 18 years, I feel it is appropriate to leave them a bequest that reflects the value they placed on family loyalty." My mother sat up straighter, smoothing her fur coat. "See," she whispered to Richard, "I told you. She was difficult, but she was still family. She wouldn't leave us with nothing. Therefore," Marcus continued, "I have established a humanitarian stipend for each of them." "Stipend," Caleb repeated, the word tasting sour in his mouth. "What kind of stipend?" "The estate," Marcus read, "will pay to Richard Langston, Martha Langston, and Caleb Langston the sum of $100,000 each." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, of oxygen being sucked out of the room. $100,000, to a normal family, it was a life-changing amount. It was a mortgage payoff. It was college tuition. but to my family, who had walked into this room mentally spending $500 million. It was not a gift. It was an insult. It was a rounding error. It was lunch money. "Is that a joke?" Caleb asked. His voice was quiet, trembling with a rage that was starting to boil over. "You missed a 0 or 2. Tell me you missed a 0. Marcus." "I read what is written," Marcus said calmly. $100,000, a one-time payment, total. "That is impossible," my mother shrieked. The veneer of the grieving sister vanished instantly. Her face twisted into an ugly mask of entitlement. "She was worth $500 million. We are her flesh and blood. 100,000. That won't even cover our debts. We have plans. We have obligations." "She can't do this," Richard stammered, his face going gray. "I told the bank. I told them the liquidity was coming. They gave me the bridge loan based on— Oh God." I watched them unravel. It was fascinating. It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The structural failures exposing themselves one by one. "There is a condition," Marcus said, raising his voice slightly to be heard over my mother's hyperventilating. Caleb snapped his head up. "A condition to get the crumbs. What condition?" Marcus reached into the envelope and pulled out 3 separate sheets of paper. He slid them across the black marble table. One stopped in front of Richard, one in front of Martha, one in front of Caleb. "To release the funds," Marcus explained, "Vivian required that you each sign a sworn affidavit of truth. These documents must be notarized and filed with the public probate court record." Caleb snatched his paper up. He read it. His eyes went wide. The blood rushed into his face, turning it a deep, violent crimson. "This," Caleb choked. He looked at me, his eyes bulging. "You wrote this. You be—" "Read it aloud." "Caleb," I said. My voice was soft, but it carried across the table like a whip crack. "If you want the money, read the text." Caleb slammed the paper down on the table. "I am not reading this garbage." "Then I will," Marcus said. He picked up his copy. The affidavit for Caleb Langston reads, "I, Caleb Langston, hereby admit under penalty of perjury that on December 24th, 18 years ago, I stole diamond inventory from my father's place of employment to cover gambling debts. I further admit that I planted the stolen item in the backpack of my sister, Aria Langston, and falsely accused her of the crime to protect my own reputation. I acknowledge that I am solely responsible for her placement in the St. Jude Orphanage." My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She looked at the paper in front of her. "And yours, Mrs. Langston," Marcus continued relentlessly, "reads I, Martha Langston, admit that I knew or strongly suspected my son's guilt. Yet I chose to abandon my daughter to the state foster care system to preserve the family's social standing. I admit that I valued my reputation more than the safety of my 14-year-old child." The room vibrated with the weight of the words. For 18 years, they had buried this truth. They had painted over it with lies, with justifications, with "it was for the best." Now, Vivian had stripped the paint away. She was forcing them to look at the rot. "I won't sign this," Caleb hissed. He stood up, kicking his chair back. It hit the glass wall with a dull thud. "This is blackmail. This is defamation. You want me to sign a confession to a felony for a measly $100,000. You are insane. It is not a felony anymore." "Caleb," I said calmly. I picked up my glass of water and took a sip. The water was cool and clean. "The statute of limitations on the theft expired years ago. You won't go to jail. You will just go on the public record as a liar and a coward. That is the price of the money. Truth for cash. It seems like a fair exchange." "It is humiliation," my mother wailed. "Aria, how can you let them do this to us? I am your mother. We made a mistake." "Yes, but we were scared. We were trying to protect the family. Vivian is dead. She can't hurt us anymore. You can stop this. You have the controlling interest. Just write us a check. We will go away. We promise." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had peeled my fingers off her coat in the snow. I cannot stop it, I lied. Vivian's instructions are binding. And frankly, Mother, I wouldn't stop it if I could. You sold me for the price of a quiet life. Now Vivian is buying the truth back. The price is set. $100,000. Take it or leave it. We leave it, Caleb shouted. He pointed a shaking finger at me. You think you have won. You think you can sit there in your expensive suit and judge us. You are just a bitter, lonely woman who poisoned a dying old lady's mind. He grabbed his briefcase. I am not signing that confession, and I am not taking your charity. We are going to fight this. We are going to contest the will. Marcus looked up over his spectacles. Mr. Langston, I would strongly advise against that. Shut up, old man, Caleb spat. I know the law. This is undue influence. This is coercion. Vivian was sick. She had ALS. She couldn't even speak at the end. Arya wrote this will. Arya forced her to sign it. We will prove it in court. We will get the whole $500 million. He turned to his parents. Get up. We are leaving. I am calling Garrett Swopes. Marcus stiffened slightly. Garrett Swopes was a notorious probate litigator, a man known in legal circles as the sewer rat. He took cases on contingency and fought them by destroying reputations in the press. If you file a contest, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. You need to be aware of Article 10. I don't care about your articles, Caleb yelled. Article 10, Marcus said, raising his voice to override him, is the poison pill clause. Vivian anticipated that your greed might outweigh your shame. She included a provision specifically for a legal challenge. A poison pill? Caleb scoffed. That is corporate law. It doesn't apply to estates. Vivian Sterling made her own laws, Marcus said. The clause states that in the event of a formal legal challenge filed by any member of the Langston family, the assets of the estate are immediately frozen. Furthermore, if the challenge is pursued, a secondary liquidation protocol is triggered. You are bluffing, Caleb said. He leaned over the table, his face inches from Marcus's. No one burns $500 million just to prove a point. You are terrified we will sue because you know we will win. You know this won't hold up. He looked at me with a sneer. You overplayed your hand, little sister. You got greedy with the revenge, and now you are going to lose everything. I looked back at him. I did not blink. I did not flinch. There is no negotiation. Caleb, I said, sign the paper and take the stipend, or walk out that door and start a war you cannot win. But know this if you sue. You are not fighting a ghost. You are fighting me. Then get ready for a fight, Caleb said. He grabbed his mother's arm, hauling her out of the chair. Richard followed, looking back at the check on the table with longing eyes. But too weak to defy his son, they marched toward the double doors. Caleb stopped with his hand on the handle. He turned back one last time. Enjoy the view, Arya, he said, because by the time I am done with you, you will be back in the gutter where we left you. He slammed the doors. The sound reverberated through the glass room, vibrating in the floorboards. The silence rushed back in, heavy and sudden. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the unsigned affidavits. The papers were crisp, white, and untouched. They took the bait, Marcus said softly. He did not look happy. He looked like a man who had just watched a ship steer willfully into an iceberg. Yes, I said. They did. Garrett Swopes is a dirty fighter, Marcus warned. He will drag up everything, the orphanage, your time at MIT. He will invent lovers, scandals, addictions. He will put your face on every tabloid cover in New York. I know, I said. And the poison pill? Marcus hesitated. Arya, if they actually push this to a verdict, do you really want to execute it? It is nuclear. There is no coming back. I stood up. I walked to the window. The blizzard outside had intensified. The city was disappearing behind a curtain of white. I put my hand against the cold glass. I thought of Vivian sitting in this exact spot, her body failing but her mind sharpening the blade. Vivian gave them a choice, I said, watching the snow swirl into the void. She gave them a door. They chose to burn the house down instead. I turned back to Marcus. Let them file the suit, I said. Let them hire swopes. Let them scream to the press. And when they are standing in the wreckage, wondering where the money went, I want to be the one to tell them. Tell them what? Marcus asked. That the check for $100,000 was the most money they were ever going to see. I picked up my briefcase. Prepare the defense, Marcus, and get the PR team on standby. The war has started. The assault began not in a courtroom, but on the morning talk shows, 3 days after the reading. I turned on the television in my office to see my family sitting on a beige couch, bathed in the warm, sympathetic lighting of the morning hour. My mother was wearing a modest pastel cardigan, clutching a tissue. Caleb was in a suit, looking grave and concerned. Richard sat between them, staring at the floor like a broken man. The headline on the screen read, "The Stolen Legacy, One Family's Fight Against a Corporate Predator." "We just want justice for Vivian," Caleb was saying, his voice thick with practiced emotion. "My aunt was a brilliant woman, but in her final year, she was not herself. She was isolated, vulnerable, and my sister, Arya, she took advantage of that. She cut the phone lines. She fired the nurses. She locked our aunt in that penthouse and rewrote the will while Vivian was too weak to hold a pen." The host, a woman known for her softball questions and high ratings, leaned in. "That sounds terrifying. You are saying Arya Langston held her own aunt prisoner." "I am saying," Caleb said, looking directly into the camera, "that my sister is a master manipulator who has spent 18 years plotting to steal what belongs to this family. She didn't just steal the money. She stole our chance to say goodbye." My mother let out a sob. "I just wanted to see my sister one last time," she wept. "But the security guards, they wouldn't let me in. Arya told them to keep us out." I watched the screen, my face impassive. It was a lie so complete, so inverted from reality, that it was almost artistic. They were projecting their own abandonment of me onto my relationship with Vivian. The reaction was immediate and nuclear. By noon, the hashtag Boycott Sterling was trending on X. TikTok was flooded with videos of justice warriors dissecting my life, analyzing photos of me at galas, calling me the Ice Queen of New York and the corporate vampire. The internet loves a villain, especially a rich, successful woman who refuses to perform emotional labor for the public. By 2 o'clock, the stock price of Sterling Architecture had dipped 4%. By 4 o'clock, the protesters arrived. They gathered outside the glass doors of the Sterling Tower, holding signs that read, "Justice for the Langstons and Arya equals thief." Caleb had hired them. I recognized the organizers. They were professional activists who showed up wherever there was a paycheck and a camera crew. Inside the tower, the atmosphere was tense. My executive team was panicked. "We need to issue a statement," my VP of Communications, a woman named Sarah, urged, pacing in front of my desk. "We need to deny the allegations. We need to release Vivian's medical records. We need to show them the visitor logs proving they never tried to visit." "No," I said, not looking up from my tablet. "Arya, the stock is bleeding," Sarah argued. "Our partners in Tokyo are calling. They are worried about the reputational risk. If we don't fight back, the narrative solidifies." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the ants with their picket signs. "We do not fight them on their turf. Sarah," I said, "if we release a statement, we validate their claims. We make it a debate. It is not a debate. It is a siege." I turned to her. "Do not engage. Do not reply to the comments. Do not give interviews. Silence is the only thing that confuses a screamer." "But they are dragging your name through the mud," she said. "Let them," I said. "Mud washes off, but never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it." But Caleb was not content with just mud. He wanted blood. The harassment escalated. My senior architects started receiving emails from anonymous accounts. They were threats, veiled but vicious. We know where your kids go to school. Sterling is a sinking ship. Jump before you drown. The CEO is a criminal. Are you an accomplice? It was clumsy, it was desperate, and it was exactly what I was waiting for. I called a meeting with my head of cybersecurity, a man named David. We need to feed the beast, I told him. Caleb is hungry for a win. He thinks he is winning the PR war, but he is running out of cash. The lawyers, the protesters, the bots. It all costs money he doesn't have. He needs a lifeline. What do you have in mind? David asked. A canary trap, I said. We crafted a document. It was a digital memo, stamped confidential and board eyes only. The subject line was emergency liquidation of aerodynamic subsidiary. The content of the memo detailed a fabricated crisis. It claimed that the pressure from the lawsuit and the stock dip had caused a liquidity crunch. It stated that I, Aria Langston, was panicking and looking to sell off one of our most valuable tech subsidiaries for pennies on the dollar to raise quick cash specifically. $50 million in cash to settle the family dispute quietly. It was the bait Caleb had been dreaming of. It confirmed his bias that I was weak, that the pressure was working, and that there was money on the table. We planted the document on a secure but penetrable server node that we knew Caleb's hired hackers cheap. Dark web mercenaries had been pinging for days. We left the digital back door slightly ajar, just enough for a rat to squeeze through. It took less than 6 hours. At 3 a.m, David called me. The canary is singing, he said. The file was accessed. IP traces back to a burner laptop, but the user logged into a personal Dropbox account immediately after to upload it. The account belongs to Caleb Langston. Did he share it? I asked. Oh, he is sharing it, David said, his voice tinged with dark amusement. He is not sending it to the press. He is sending it to sharks. We watched in real time as Caleb forwarded the stolen document to a list of contacts. They were not legitimate investors. They were loan sharks, shadow financiers, and shady private equity vultures known for hostile takeovers. In the emails which we intercepted, Caleb was manic. See, she is folding. He wrote to a man named Victor, a known money launderer. The company is up for grabs. I need a bridge loan of $5 million to keep the lawsuit going for another month. Once she settles, I will have control. I will give you the subsidiary for half its value. It is a guaranteed 10-time return. He was selling assets he didn't own. He was promising criminal favors. He was soliciting bribes. Record everything, I ordered David. Every email, every promise, every digital handshake. I want a file so thick it will take a forklift to bring it into court. While Caleb was digging his own grave with a digital shovel, the emotional war took a strange turn. 2 nights later, my intercom buzzed. It was the concierge of my apartment building. Ms. Langston, he said, sounding uncomfortable. There is a woman here to see you. She says she is your mother. She is crying. Ma'am, she says it is an emergency. I looked at the monitor. My mother was standing in the lobby. She was not wearing the fur coat. She was wearing a simple raincoat, her hair wet from the drizzle. She looked small. She looked old. Send her up, I said. When I opened the door, she did not hug me. She stood in the hallway, dripping water onto the marble floor. Aria, she whispered, can I come in? I stepped aside. She walked into my living room, her eyes widening as she took in the view of the Hudson River, the minimalist Italian furniture, the original Rothko on the wall. It was the life she had always wanted, and it belonged to the daughter she had thrown away. It is beautiful, she said softly. You have done so well. What do you want? Mother? I asked. I did not offer her a drink. I did not offer her a seat. She turned to me, her face crumbling. I want this to stop. Caleb, he is out of control. He is talking to dangerous people. He is mortgaging the house. He is going to ruin us. He is doing exactly what you taught him to do, I said. He is trying to take what isn't his. He is your brother, she cried. Arya, please, I know we made mistakes. I know we hurt you. But we are family. Blood is thicker than water. And money is thicker than blood, I countered. She stepped closer, reaching out a hand. I am not asking for everything. Just settle with him. Give him something. Half. Split the estate. 250 million. It is still more money than you can spend in a lifetime. If you do that, he will stop. We can be a family again. We can start over. I looked at her hand. It was trembling. She was not here to save Caleb. She was here because she was terrified that if Caleb lost, she would lose everything too. She was hedging her bets. Wait here, I said. I walked into my study. I opened the safe. I took out a single piece of paper. It was yellowed with age, the edges fraying. I walked back and handed it to her. She looked at it. It was the intake form from St. Jude's Orphanage, dated December 24th, 18 years ago. Reason for surrender, parent refusal to custody. Personal belongings. 1 backpack, no valuables. Child was left without winter coat. My mother stared at the paper. Her hand shook so violently the paper rattled. You kept this, she whispered. I kept everything, I said. You say you want to be a family, but families don't leave 14-year-old girls in the snow with nothing. You didn't split the pain with me then. Mother, you gave it all to me, so why should I split the success with you now? I took the paper back from her fingers. There is no deal, I said. There is no settlement. There is only the law. Go home to your son. Tell him the canary is singing. What? She asked, confused. He will understand, I said. Goodbye, Mother. She stood there for a moment, looking at me with a mixture of fear and hatred. Then she turned and walked out. As the door clicked shut, I felt a strange sense of peace. The last thread was cut. The woman who had birthed me was gone. In her place was just a defendant. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. My phone buzzed. It was David. We have it, he said. Caleb just signed a digital contract with the loan shark. He put up the future ownership of Sterling Architecture as collateral. It is wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy. Good, I said. Package it up. We are done waiting. The siege was over. It was time to open the gates and let the monsters in, only to show them that the castle was empty, and the dungeon was waiting. The desperation of a drowning man is a dangerous thing, but the desperation of a drowning narcissist is predictable. Caleb was out of money. The lawsuit against the estate was burning through cash at a rate of $10,000 a day. The canary trap I had executed, leaking the fake memo about the subsidiary sale, had worked too well. Caleb had leveraged everything he owned, including his soul, to the loan sharks based on a promise of a payout that was never coming. Now, the sharks were circling. He needed a miracle, or more specifically, he needed what he believed was the sterling reserve. For years, my family had cultivated a delusional mythology about Aunt Vivian. They whispered that she did not trust banks, which was laughable, considering she owned shares in 3 of them. They convinced themselves that somewhere in the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue, hidden behind a false wall or under a floorboard, was a physical cache of liquid assets, gold bars, bearer bonds, bags of cash. It was the kind of fairy tale lazy people tell themselves to justify theft. I decided to open the door for them. I had my assistant book a first-class flight to Tokyo for Arya Langston. I had the itinerary leaked to a travel agency data node that I knew Caleb's private investigator was monitoring. According to the digital trail, I was currently 30,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean, en route to a 2-week summit in Japan. The penthouse was supposed to be empty. It was not empty. I was sitting in the server room, a reinforced bunker concealed behind a bookshelf in the library. It was 3 a.m. The room was bathed in the cool blue glow of 20 monitors. I was drinking an espresso. watching the thermal camera feeds of the service elevator. "Come on, Caleb," I whispered to the screens. "Don't be late." At 3:14 in the morning, the elevator override signal triggered. It was a clumsy hack, a brute force attack on the keypad that took 4 minutes to bypass. Vivian would have been insulted by the lack of finesse. The doors slid open. 3 figures stepped into the service corridor. On the thermal display, they were ghosts of orange and red heat against the blue background of the hallway. The first 2 were large, bulky men carrying duffel bags and crowbars. Hired muscle, cheap, judging by their lack of gloves. The third figure was smaller. He was wearing a black hoodie and a face mask, but I recognized the posture immediately. The nervous twitch of the hands, the arrogant tilt of the head. Caleb. They moved toward the main foyer. I watched them approach the heavy mahogany doors. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a device, an electronic lockpicker he must have bought off the dark web. He jammed it into the smart lock. I let him struggle for 30 seconds. Then, I remotely disengaged the deadbolt. Click. Caleb froze. He looked at the lock, thinking his toy had worked. He pushed the door open and stepped into the penthouse. "We are in," I heard him whisper through the high-fidelity microphones embedded in the ceiling. "Clear the floor. Find the safe. Check the master bedroom closet and the library." "You said the place was empty," one of the thugs grunted. His voice was deep, rough gravel. "She is in Tokyo," Caleb hissed. "We have 4 hours before the cleaning crew arrives. Start looking for false panels." They spread out. They were walking into the belly of a beast that was fully awake. Vivian had designed this penthouse not just as a home, but as a fortress. The environmental controls, the lighting, the locks, everything was centralized. And tonight, I was the operator. I waited until they were deep inside. Caleb was in the library, pulling books off the shelves, looking for a movie cliché lever. The 2 thugs were in the living room, eyeing the silver collection. I tapped a command on my console. Protocol lockdown. A series of heavy metallic thuds echoed through the apartment as the steel shutters descended over the floor-to-ceiling windows. The panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline vanished, replaced by solid walls of reinforced alloy. The thugs jumped. "What was that?" "Just the storm shutters," Caleb called out, though his voice wavered. "Automatic timers. Ignore it. Keep looking." I tapped the second command, protocol blackout. The lights died. Not a gradual dimming, but an instant, total plunge into absolute darkness. The only light came from the small flashlights they carried, beams cutting frantically through the black void. "Caleb," one of the thugs shouted. "I don't like this. Let's grab the silver and go." "No," Caleb screamed. "We are here for the vault." "It is here. I know it is here." I leaned into the microphone. I did not shout. I used the God voice setting, an acoustic trick Vivian had installed that projected sound from every speaker in every room simultaneously, making it impossible to pinpoint the source. "You are looking for something that does not exist. Caleb." The sound was omnipresent. It vibrated in the walls, on the thermal monitor. I saw Caleb spin around wildly, swinging his flashlight beam at the empty air. The 2 thugs backed up against each other, raising their crowbars. "Who is that?" Caleb shrieked. "Arya." "You thought I was in Tokyo," I said. My voice was calm, detached, filling the darkness like cold water. "You thought the house was asleep, but the house is never asleep, brother. It is watching you. It is recording you. Every word, every footprint." "Come out," Caleb yelled, trying to sound brave but failing. "I know you are here. You can't scare me. This is my house. It belongs to the family." "It belongs to the architect," I corrected. I initiated the next phase. Protocol disorientation. The lights began to strobe, blinding white flashes firing at irregular intervals, designed to disrupt equilibrium. At the same time, the sound system began to play a low-frequency hum, 19 Hz. It is a frequency just below the range of human hearing, known to cause feelings of dread, nausea, and paranoia. The thugs dropped the duffel bags. "I am out," the first one yelled. He ran for the front door. He grabbed the handle and pulled. Locked. He slammed his shoulder against it. It was solid oak reinforced with a steel core. It did not budge. "Open the door," he screamed, pounding on the wood. "You are trespassing in a secure facility," I said over the speakers. "The police have not been called yet, but the perimeter is sealed. You are trapped in a box. Gentlemen, and the air conditioning is about to turn off." I cut the ventilation. The silence of the fans dying was heavy. The air in the room instantly felt stagnant. Caleb was in the center of the living room now. The strobe lights were making his movements look jerky, robotic. He looked like a rat trapped in a maze. "You are insane," Caleb screamed at the ceiling. "Let us out. I will sue you for false imprisonment." "You broke into my home," I said. "You are carrying burglary tools. You have 2 accomplices with criminal records." "Yes. I ran their faces through the database while you were panicking. Mr. Kovac and Mr. Miller, both out on parole. I wonder what their parole officers will think of this." The thugs turned on Caleb. "You said this was a milk run." Kovac, the larger one, roared. He grabbed Caleb by the lapels of his hoodie and slammed him against the wall. "You said she was gone. You said there was no security." "Get off me." Caleb struggled. "She is bluffing. She is watching on a camera, Arya. Open the door or I swear to God." "Or you will what?" I asked. "Steal another ring frame, another sister." I pressed a button. The strobe light stopped. The room was plunged back into darkness. "I am going to give you a choice," I said. "Option A. You wait here in the dark for the police. I have a direct line to the precinct. The response time is 7 minutes. What is option B?" one of the thugs begged. "Option B," I said. "You tell me the truth. Caleb, look at the camera in the corner. The red light. A tiny red LED blinked in the darkness of the ceiling corner. Caleb looked up, squinting against the glare of his flashlight. "Tell them," I commanded. "Tell the camera why you are here. Tell the camera there is no gold. Tell the camera you are broke and you came to steal whatever you could find to pay off your loan sharks." "Go to hell," Caleb spat. 7 minutes, I said. "Officer Miller is on duty tonight. Remember him? He was the one who arrested me when I was 14. I think he would appreciate the symmetry." "Say it," Kovac shouted, shaking Caleb. "Say it so she lets us out." Caleb was weeping now, tears of rage and humiliation. He was pinned against the wall by his own hired muscle, trapped in the dark by the sister he had tormented for decades. "I needed the money," Caleb screamed at the camera. "Are you happy I needed the money? There is no gold. I made it up. I just wanted to find something. Anything to sell. I am broke. Okay, I am ruined. Open the door." "And the lawsuit," I pressed. "The claim that Vivian was senile." "It is a lie," Caleb sobbed, sliding down the wall. "It is all a lie. She was fine. I just wanted the money. Please, Arya, please let me go." I sat back in my chair in the server room. I had the recording. It was high-definition video and audio, a full confession, obtained under duress perhaps, but admissible enough to destroy his credibility in any probate court on Earth. "Thank you, Caleb," I said. I picked up my phone. I dialed 911. "Emergency," the operator said. "This is Arya Langston at 432 Park Avenue," I said calmly. "I have intruders in my home. 3 men. They are armed. I have locked myself in the safe room. Please hurry." I did not open the doors. I let them wait in the dark for 12 minutes. I watched them pace. I watched the thugs argue. I watched Caleb curl up into a ball on the expensive Persian rug, sobbing into his hands. When the police arrived, they had to use a hydraulic ram to breach the front door. The sound was deafening. "Police, get down, hands on your heads." I switched the lights back on. The scene that greeted the SWAT team was pathetic. 2 thugs on their knees, hands in the air. Caleb Langston, curled in a fetal position, blinded by the sudden light, weeping like a child. I unlocked the hidden door of the library and stepped out. I was still holding my cup of espresso. Thank you, officers, I said. They are all yours. Caleb looked up. He saw me standing there, pristine, untouched, looking down at him with the same clinical detachment Vivian had taught me. You, he whispered. You were here the whole time. I am always here, I said. They dragged him out in handcuffs. He did not fight. He was broken. The aftermath at the precinct the next morning was a theater of the absurd. I sat in the captain's office, reviewing the statement. My lawyer, Marcus, was beside me, on the other side of the glass partition, in the waiting area. My parents were making a scene. My mother was screaming at the desk sergeant. He was not burglarizing the house, she shrieked, her voice cracking. He has a key. He was going to retrieve family heirlooms, pictures of his grandmother. Arya changed the locks without telling him. It is a misunderstanding. Ma'am, the sergeant said, looking exhausted. He was wearing a ski mask. He had a crowbar. He had 2 felons with him. That is not how you pick up a photo album. My son is a good boy, Richard bellowed, trying to summon authority he didn't have. He is a businessman. This is a setup. His sister invited him over. I walked out of the office. They saw me. Arya, my mother shouted, rushing toward the barrier. Tell them you invited him. Tell them it was a mistake. You can't let him go to prison. He is your brother. I stopped. I looked at them. They were so small, so loud, and so small. I invited no one, I said. He broke into my home. He terrorized me, and he confessed. I turned to Marcus. File the restraining order, permanent, for all 3 of them. I want a 500-yard exclusion zone around my home, my office, and any Sterling property. Done, Marcus said. And Marcus, I added, loud enough for my parents to hear. Take the video of the break-in and the confession. Submit it to the probate court as Exhibit A for the motion to dismiss the will contest. You wouldn't, Richard gasped. That video. It will destroy him. He destroyed himself. Richard, I said. I just turned on the lights. I walked out of the precinct into the cold morning air. The sun was rising over the city. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of exhaust and victory. Caleb was in a cell. The lawsuit was dead in the water. My parents were exposed as liars. But I wasn't done. The break-in was a desperate act, but it gave me the final piece of ammunition I needed. I didn't just want to win the lawsuit. I wanted to ensure that when the dust settled, there would be no Langston family left to haunt me. I hailed a cab. Sterling Tower, I told the driver. I had a skyscraper to run, and I had a final act to prepare. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and expensive cologne. It was packed. Every seat in the gallery was filled with reporters, legal analysts, and the curious public who had been following the Sterling succession war on the news. They were vultures waiting for a carcass, and today, I intended to feed them. I sat at the defense table next to Marcus Thorne. My posture was rigid, my face a mask of practiced indifference. Across the aisle, my family sat huddled together like survivors on a life raft. Caleb, out on bail for the break-in, looked haggard. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. My parents flanked him, their faces set in expressions of righteous victimhood. They still believed they could win. They still believed that if they cried loud enough, the judge would hand them the keys to the kingdom. Garrett Swopes, their lawyer, stood up. He was a man who wore suits that were too shiny and a smile that looked like a bear trap. He paced in front of the jury box, gesturing theatrically. "Ladies and gentlemen," Swopes began, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "this case is not about money. It is about elder abuse. It is about a lonely, dying woman, Vivian Sterling, who was isolated from her loving family by a niece consumed with greed. Arya Langston took advantage of a tragedy. She whispered poison into her aunt's ear. She locked the doors. She cut the phone lines. And in the final, confused weeks of Vivian's life, she coerced her into signing a document that erased her own brother and nephew from history. He turned and pointed a finger at me. Look at her. Not a tear, not a shred of remorse. She sits there on a throne of gold built on the grave of her family's legacy. We ask the court to overturn this fraudulent will and restore the estate to the rightful heirs." The gallery murmured. It was a good story. It was the story of the wicked witch and the innocent villagers. I did not flinch. I did not look at the jury. I looked at the judge, Honorable Justice Halloway, a woman known for her impatience with theatrics. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Halloway said, peering over her glasses. "Your response?" Marcus stood up. He did not pace. He did not shout. He walked to the podium with the gravitas of a man who held the 10 Commandments. "Your Honor," Marcus said, "the plaintiff relies on a narrative of incapacity. They claim Vivian Sterling was confused. They claim she was weak. We would like to call our first witness, Dr. Aris Thorne, Chief of Neurology at Mount Sinai." "Doctor." Thorne took the stand. He was concise, clinical, and devastating. "I examined Vivian Sterling 3 days before her death." "Doctor." Thorne testified, consulting his notes. "Her motor functions were failing due to ALS." "Yes, but her cognitive function, it was pristine. She scored 30 out of 30 on the mini mental state examination. She was solving complex architectural equations in her head to pass the time. The idea that she was confused is medically baseless." Swopes tried to cross-examine, but he hit a wall of medical fact. Next came the nurses, then the notary who witnessed the signing. Each one testified to the same thing: Vivian Sterling was sharp as a razor until her final breath. "The defense would like to introduce Exhibit C," Marcus announced, a video deposition recorded by Vivian Sterling 2 weeks prior to her passing. The courtroom screens flickered to life. There she was, Vivian Sterling, sitting in her wheelchair in the penthouse library. She looked frail, her body wasted by the disease, but her eyes, those steel-gray eyes, burned with an intensity that silenced the room. "My name is Vivian Sterling," the video Vivian said, her voice raspy but clear. "I am recording this statement to prevent the inevitable circus my family will create after I am gone." My mother gasped in the courtroom. Caleb stared at the screen, mesmerizing horror on his face. "I am not leaving my estate to my brother Richard, or his son Caleb, for a very specific reason," Vivian continued. She looked directly into the camera lens. "It is not because I am being manipulated. It is not because I am confused. It is because they are morally bankrupt." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. "They are not builders," Vivian said. "They are termites. They consume. They destroy. I watched them throw away their own daughter because she was inconvenient. I watched them beg for money they did not earn. I will not let them destroy what I have built. I leave everything to Arya not because she is my niece, but because she is the only one of them who knows the value of work. She is the builder. They are the rubble." The screen went black. Swopes looked like he had been slapped. The narrative of the confused old lady had just been incinerated by the lady herself. "Your Honor," I said. Standing up, my voice was steady, but my hands were gripping the table edge so hard my knuckles were white. "I would like to address the court regarding the character of the plaintiffs." Swopes jumped up. "Objection relevance." "Overruled," Judge Halloway said. "I want to hear this. Proceed. Ms. Langston." I walked to the witness box. I did not sit. I stood. 18 years ago, I began, looking directly at my parents. I stood in a living room in Queens while police officers searched my backpack. A diamond ring was found. It was stolen inventory from my father's store. I saw my father shrink in his seat. My mother put her hand over her mouth. "I was 14, I said. I begged my parents to believe me. I told them I didn't take it, but my brother, Caleb, told them I was a thief, and instead of investigating, instead of protecting their child, they drove me to St. Jude's Orphanage and left me there on Christmas Eve. They erased me to save their reputation." "Objection," Swopes yelled. "This is ancient history. It is hearsay." "It is not hearsay," I said. "It is evidence of character, and I have proof." I nodded to Marcus. "Defense introduces Exhibit D," Marcus said. A police report dated December 24th, 2007, and Exhibit EA sworn affidavit from Mr. Solomon Green, owner of Green's Pawn Shop. Marcus held up the document. Mr. Green testifies, Marcus read, that on December 23rd, 2007, one day before the alleged theft, Caleb Langston entered his shop and attempted to pawn a gold watch. When that wasn't enough, he returned 3 days later, after the scandal, and sold a diamond ring matching the description of the stolen inventory. He claimed it was his grandmother's. The courtroom erupted. Reporters were typing furiously on their laptops. "That is a lie," Caleb screamed, jumping to his feet. "You dug that up. That was 20 years ago." "Sit down, Mr. Langston." Judge Holloway banged her gavel. "One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." Caleb slumped back, his face pale. He knew it. Everyone knew it. The jury was looking at him not as a grieving nephew, but as a monster who framed his little sister. My mother was crying, but these were not performance tears. These were tears of shame. She looked at the floor, unable to meet the eyes of the strangers judging her. "They claimed they wanted the money because they were family," I said, my voice ringing in the hall. "But they ceased to be my family the night they chose a lie over their daughter. They are here for the money, just the money. And that brings us to the final point." I turned to Marcus. "Activate the poison pill." Swopes looked confused. "Your Honor, the poison pill is a corporate defense strategy. It has no place in, it has every place." Marcus interrupted. "It is Article 10 of the last will and testament, a conditional clause triggered specifically by the filing of a formal contest." Marcus picked up the final document. It was the red-bordered paper from the reading. "The clause reads," Marcus intoned, "in the event that Richard, Martha, or Caleb Langston formally contest this will in a court of law, thereby proving their intent to disregard my final wishes for financial gain, the following distribution protocol is immediately executed." The room went deadly silent. "The entirety of the estate," Marcus read, "including all liquid assets, real estate holdings, and the controlling interest in Sterling architecture, shall be immediately liquidated." Caleb's head snapped up. "Liquidated? What does that mean?" "It means," Marcus said, looking at him, "that the money does not go to Arya Langston." A collective gasp went through the gallery. "If you sue," Marcus explained, "Arya gets nothing. You get nothing." "Then where does it go?" Swopes whispered, dread coloring his voice. "The entire sum," Marcus read, "estimated at $500 million, is to be irrevocably transferred to the newly formed Sterling Truth Foundation, a charitable trust dedicated to the legal defense of children wrongly accused of crimes and the support of foster youth abandoned by their families." I looked at Caleb. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had thought I was fighting to keep the money. He thought I was greedy, just like him. He thought that if he pushed hard enough, I would settle to save my fortune. He didn't realize that I didn't care about the money. "You," Caleb choked out. You knew this would happen if we sued." "I warned you," I said. "Marcus warned you. The will warned you. But you didn't listen. You were so sure that I loved the money as much as you do. You projected your own weakness onto me. You lost everything," my mother screamed, standing up. $500 million. You threw it away just to spite us." "I didn't throw it away," I said calmly. "I gave it to the children you forgot. I gave it to the girl left in the snow." Judge Holloway looked at the document. She looked at the video of Vivian. She looked at the pathetic trio of plaintiffs. "The court finds," Judge Holloway ruled, her voice firm, "that the will is valid. The court further finds that the poison pill clause is a legal and binding condition of the estate. By filing this contest, the plaintiffs have triggered the clause." She banged the gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. "The estate of Vivian Sterling is hereby ordered to liquidate. All assets are to be transferred to the Sterling Truth Foundation immediately. The plaintiffs are awarded nothing. Furthermore, The plaintiffs are ordered to pay all legal fees for the defense. Case dismissed. Pandemonium broke out. Reporters were shouting questions. The bailiff was trying to maintain order. Caleb stood there, frozen. He looked at me across the aisle. His eyes were wide, empty holes. He had lost. He had not just lost the lawsuit. He had incinerated the very prize he was fighting for. He had burned the house down to get the insurance money, only to realize the policy was written in someone else's name. "You are crazy," he whispered. "You have nothing now. You are just as poor as we are." I picked up my briefcase. I smoothed the front of my jacket. "I am not poor. Caleb," I said, walking past him. "I have a job, I have a legacy, and I have the truth." I walked out of the courtroom. The flashbulbs popped like lightning. I didn't stop. I walked through the crowd, past the shouting reporters, past the stunned faces of my parents. I walked out onto the courthouse steps. The sun was shining. The air was crisp. I took a deep breath. I had lost $500 million today, and I had never felt richer. The gavel had fallen, but the dust had not yet settled. The media called it the billion-dollar bluff. The headlines screamed that Arya Langston had incinerated a fortune out of spite. They called me the kamikaze heiress. They thought I was a woman who had cut off her nose to spite her face, a pyromaniac who had burned down the castle just to kill the rats in the walls. They were wrong. They were looking at the demolition, but they were not seeing the renovation. 2 days after the verdict, I sat in the boardroom of the Sterling Tower. The mood was not somber. It was electric. The board of directors sat around the long table, looking at me with a mixture of awe and terror. "So," Arthur Pendergast said, clearing his throat, "the estate is gone. Liquidation begins on Monday. The Sterling Truth Foundation is now the owner of all assets, including the majority shares of this company." "Correct," I said. I was not wearing black today. I was wearing white, a stark, architectural white suit that signaled a new beginning. "And," Pendergast continued, looking at the bylaws in front of him, "according to the charter of the foundation, which you drafted with Vivian, the foundation requires a permanent executive director to manage the assets and oversee the philanthropic mission." "Correct," I repeated. "And that director," Pendergast read, "is appointed for life, with a salary commensurate with the top 1% of non-profit executives globally. And crucially, the director retains the voting rights for the Sterling Architecture shares held by the trust." He looked up. A slow smile spread across his face. "You didn't lose control," he said. "You just changed the tax bracket." I leaned back in my chair. "I own nothing. Arthur, I have no personal claim to the $500 million. I cannot buy a yacht with it. I cannot gamble it away. But I control where every single cent goes. I control the company. I control the legacy. And I draw a salary of $2 million a year to do it." I looked around the table. "My family wanted the money to spend," I said. "I wanted the money to work. Now, it is locked in a fortress where they can never touch it, and I am the only one with the key. It is not poverty, it is protection." The board voted unanimously to confirm my appointment. I walked out of that meeting not as an heiress, but as something far more powerful. I was the guardian, while I was securing my future. The Langston family was facing their apocalypse. The poison pill was not just a defensive measure, it was a financial singularity, because they had contested the will and lost. The court had ordered them to pay the legal fees for both sides. My defense team was the best in New York. The bill was astronomical, $3 million in legal costs. And then there was Garrett Swopes. The sewer rat lawyer did not work for free. He had taken the case on a contingency basis, assuming a settlement, but because the judge had ruled the contest was frivolous and based on fraud, thanks to the evidence of the theft and the break-in, the contingency contract was voided. Swopes sued my parents for his time. They were crushed. My father, Richard, tried to declare bankruptcy, but the debt from the fraud ruling was non-dischargeable. The bank foreclosed on their house, the house where I had grown up. The house where they had sat on Christmas Eve and decided to erase me. It was sold at auction on a rainy Tuesday. I did not go. I sent an intern to pick up a specific item from the estate sale, but otherwise, I let it go. I heard it sold for less than the mortgage value, but the worst fate was reserved for Caleb. The evidence I had gathered during the canary trap, the emails where he solicited bribes, the wire fraud where he used non-existent collateral to secure loans from sharks, did not stay in my private files. I handed the entire digital dossier to the district attorney. Combined with his confession during the break-in, it was a slam dunk. Caleb was arrested at a motel on the Jersey Turnpike, where he was hiding from his loan sharks. He was charged with 6 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. I went to his arraignment. I sat in the back row. When they brought him in, he looked like a ghost. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed violently with his pale skin. He looked around the room, scanning the faces, looking for a savior. His eyes landed on me. For a second, I thought he would scream. I thought he would rage. But he just slumped. He looked at me with a terrifying clarity. He realized, finally, that he was not the protagonist of this story. He was just the villain in mine. The judge set bail at $500,000. He didn't have 500 cents. He was remanded to custody to await trial. The sentence guidelines suggested 8 to 10 years. By the time he got out, he would be 45 years old, a felon with no money, no reputation, and no family. He would be exactly what he had tried to make me destitute and alone. 2 weeks later, I was leaving the Sterling Tower. It was late. The city washed in the neon glow of a wet evening. My driver opened the door of the town car. "Ms. Langston." The voice was shrill, desperate, and hauntingly familiar. I stopped. I turned around. Standing by the edge of the sidewalk, held back by a security guard, was my mother. She looked unrecognizable. The fur coat was gone. The designer makeup was gone. She was wearing a cheap plastic raincoat and shoes that were worn down at the heels. She looked 20 years older than she had in the courtroom. She was holding a plastic bag that looked like it contained all her worldly possessions. "Let her through," I said to the guard. He stepped aside. My mother rushed forward, but she stopped 3 feet away from me. She didn't try to hug me this time. She knew that Bridge had been incinerated. "We have nowhere to go," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. "They took the house. Your father is sleeping in a shelter in the Bronx. I am staying on a friend's couch, but she says I have to leave tomorrow." She looked at my car. She looked at my suit. She looked at the tower rising behind me. "Arya," she choked out, "we are your parents. You can't let us starve. I know you are angry. I know we failed you. But this is cruel. Just a little help. Enough for an apartment. Please, I am begging you." I looked at her. I looked for the anger that had fueled me for 18 years. I looked for the rage that had kept me warm in the orphanage dormitory. It was gone. There was nothing left but a vast, cool indifference. I didn't hate her. You can't hate Ash. "You are right," I said softly. "You taught me a very important lesson. Mother." Her face lit up with a flicker of hope. "I did." "Yes," I said. "You taught me that the world is cold. You taught me that no one is coming to save you. You taught me that if you want to survive, you have to be willing to walk away from the people who hold you back." I stepped closer to her. "When I was 14, I said, you dropped me off at a building full of strangers and drove away because I was inconvenient. You told me it was for my own good. You told me I needed to learn consequences." I opened the car door. "This is your consequence, Mother. You are finally learning the lesson you tried to teach me. You are surviving without family. You should be thanking me for the opportunity." "Arya," she screamed, reaching for me. "You are a monster." "No," I said, sliding into the leather seat. "I am a masterpiece, and you were the one who broke the clay." I closed the door. The sound was solid, final, and satisfying. "Drive," I told the driver. As the car pulled away, I watched her in the side mirror. She stood on the curb, screaming at the taillights, shrinking smaller and smaller until she was just a speck in the rain. And then, nothing. I did not look back again. The car moved smoothly through the city traffic. I looked out at the skyline. I saw the buildings I had designed. I saw the steel and glass monuments to my own resilience. I realized then that revenge is not a straight line. It is not about an eye for an eye. That is too messy. True revenge is about evolution. It is about becoming so large, so undeniable, that the people who tried to bury you simply cease to exist in your orbit. I had not killed them. I had simply outgrown them. I had ascended to a plane of existence where their pettiness, their greed, and their lies could no longer touch me. They were trapped in the gravity of their own failures. While I had reached escape velocity, I had my driver drop me off not at my apartment, but at the site of the old orphanage. St. Jude's had been closed for years, the building boarded up and abandoned. I stood in front of the chain-link fence, looking at the dark windows where I had once cried myself to sleep. I took out my phone and dialed the head of my construction division. "It's Aria," I said. "I want the St. Jude property. Buy it. I don't care what it costs. Demolish it." "And what are we building there, Ms. Langston?" he asked. "A school," I said. "The Vivian Sterling Academy for the Arts and Sciences. Tuition free, housing included, for wards of the state. I will have the paperwork ready in the morning." I hung up. I looked at the rotting brick one last time. I wasn't just erasing my past. I was rewriting the future for the next generation of girls who would be left on that curb. They wouldn't find a cold bed and a bully. They would find a sanctuary. The next morning, I stood on the roof of the Sterling Tower. The wind was whipping my hair, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt the altitude. I was alone, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't lonely. Loneliness is the feeling of missing someone. Solitude is the feeling of finding yourself. I walked over to the drafting table I had set up on the terrace. The sun was rising, painting the city in gold and fire. I opened a fresh blueprint. It was the design for the new academy. The lines were clean. The structure was sound. It was built to withstand storms. It was built to last. I picked up my pen. I didn't sign it Aria Langston. I signed it the architect. I capped the pen. I looked at the horizon. The game was over. I had won. And the prize wasn't the money. The prize was the silence in my head where their voices used to be. I turned off the desk lamp. The screen of my life faded to black, leaving only the bright, unwritten future ahead. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, justice, and the ultimate payback. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your car, your office, or maybe relaxing at home? Please drop a comment below to let me know. And don't forget to subscribe to Family Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this journey with even more people.